The eve of the new year promised to be a grand celebration for a large family. The hostess had spent days preparing for the arrival of relatives, investing effort, heart, and considerable expense into creating the perfect feast. But when the mother-in-law, in front of everyone, ostentatiously presented her daughter with expensive earrings, while the daughter-in-law received only a worn-out apron, the atmosphere instantly shifted. A heavy silence descended upon the room, broken only by the clinking of dishes being cleared from the table. Hello, dear listeners. I'm delighted to welcome you to my channel. I have a new, compelling story for you. Enjoy. Margarita had always cherished holidays, especially New Year's, a time of magic, gifts, and family gatherings. But this year held something particularly special. For the first time in their 5 years of marriage to Constantine, they decided to host the New Year's Eve celebration at their own home, inviting his entire extended family. "Are you sure you can manage?" Constantine asked doubtfully when she proposed the idea. "That's 15 people, not counting us." "Of course I can," Margarita replied with a smile. "It's not like I'm suggesting this every day." The idea had, in fact, stemmed from a specific desire. After she and Constantine moved into their own apartment, a 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood, purchased with a mortgage, Margarita wanted to show her husband's relatives that they were financially stable. This was especially directed at her mother-in-law, Antonina Viktorovna, who had regarded her daughter-in-law with thinly veiled disdain from the very beginning of their relationship. "All right then," Constantine conceded, "we'll have the celebration at our place." And so the whirlwind began. Margarita planned the menu, the table setting, and every minute detail. She was determined for everything to be absolutely perfect, top-notch. She spared no expense on food or home decorations. After all, this wasn't just any New Year's. It was her opportunity to prove she was a worthy wife for Constantine. Margarita took a week off work before the holiday to ensure everything was meticulously prepared. Each day was scheduled down to the minute: grocery shopping, a thorough cleaning, and preparing dishes that could be made in advance. Constantine offered what help he could, but the bulk of the work fell on her. "Perhaps we could order some of the dishes from a restaurant," he suggested, seeing his wife bustling from dawn till dusk. "No," Margarita replied firmly. "Everything must be homemade." She knew her mother-in-law would inevitably inquire if the salads were store-bought, and she wanted to proudly state that she had prepared everything herself. On New Year's Eve, Margarita was up at 6 in the morning. The final, most intense day of preparation lay ahead. She was taking the roasted meat out of the oven when her mother-in-law called. "Antonina Viktorovna, hello!" Margarita answered cheerfully, holding the phone between her ear and shoulder as she transferred the hot dish to the counter. "Ria, I just wanted to confirm. What time should we arrive?" The mother-in-law's voice sounded its usual dry tone. "We're expecting everyone at 7 in the evening," Margarita replied. "All right. And one more question. What are you preparing for the main course? Constantine can't stand fish since childhood. I hope you remember that." Margarita closed her eyes for a second. Of course, she knew her husband's preferences better than anyone. "Yes, Antonina Viktorovna, we'll have roast beef and chicken roulades. No fish." "Good. See you this evening," the mother-in-law said, disconnecting without waiting for a response. By 7 in the evening, everything was ready. The festive table was laden with an abundance of delicacies. There were assorted salads, cold appetizers, 2 main courses, and desserts. Margarita had even baked gingerbread cookies and decorated them with icing. They looked as if they belonged in a glossy magazine. The apartment gleamed with cleanliness, the Christmas tree twinkled with lights, and a centerpiece of candles and evergreen branches graced the table. "You've outdone yourself," Constantine said with sincere admiration, surveying the results of her labor. Margarita smiled. She calculated that she had spent almost 40,000 rubles on the entire preparation. It was a considerable sum for their family, but it was worth it. Precisely at 7, the guests began to arrive. Konstantin's parents, Antonina Viktorovna and Pavel Borisovich, were the first. The mother-in-law cast a critical glance around the apartment but said nothing. Then the rest arrived. Konstantin's sister Svetlana with her husband and 2 teenage children, his cousins with their wives, an aunt and uncle, and several other distant relatives. The dinner began in a convivial atmosphere. The guests praised the dishes. Konstantin looked at his wife with pride, and Margarita felt the tension of the preceding days slowly dissipate. Even her mother-in-law nodded approvingly a few times while tasting a salad. After the main courses, just before dessert, Antonina Viktorovna suddenly stood up and announced grandly, "I have small gifts for my girls." Everyone fell silent. The mother-in-law retrieved 2 boxes from her purse, one larger, the other quite small. "Sveta," she turned to her daughter, "this is for you. Happy New Year, dear." Svetlana opened the small velvet box and gasped. "Mom, they're—" "Yes," Antonina Viktorovna replied with pride. "Diamond earrings. I know you've wanted them for a long time." Svetlana immediately tried on the gift. The earrings were indeed exquisite, small but elegant, with genuine diamonds that sparkled in the light of the holiday decorations. Then the mother-in-law turned to Margarita. "For you, Ria." Now, Margarita accepted the second box with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. It was significantly larger than the first, and for a moment a flicker of hope ignited within her that the gift would be equally impressive. Perhaps it was a fine set of dishes. But upon lifting the lid, she saw a folded apron. As she took it out and unfolded it, Margarita immediately noticed that the fabric was not new. It was slightly faded, with barely visible stains that even diligent washing hadn't removed. "This was my apron," her mother-in-law explained with a smile. "I wore it when Kostya and Sveta were little. I thought it might be useful for you. You do love to keep house, after all." An awkward silence fell over the room. Everyone's gaze shifted from the diamond earrings adorning Svetlana's ears to the worn apron in Margarita's hands. "Thank you," Margarita managed to utter, feeling a lump rise in her throat and her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She slowly stood up, still holding the apron. Then, without a word, she walked to the stove and turned off the burners one by one. Still waiting to be served were dishes of duck with apples and her grandmother's signature roast. "Ria, what are you doing?" Konstantin asked in surprise. But Margarita, as if not hearing him, began methodically removing the salads and appetizers from the table, placing them into containers. "What are you doing?" her husband asked again, this time louder. "I prepared the New Year's table for 15 of your relatives. I spent 40,000. Your mother gave my sister diamond earrings, and I got a used apron," Margarita stated in a steady voice, looking directly at her mother-in-law. Konstantin rose from his seat, his face showing his desire to understand the situation. But upon meeting his mother's gaze, he hesitated and sat back down. This was the final straw. Margarita silently continued clearing the food while everyone sat in stunned silence. Finally, Antonina Viktorovna broke the silence. "And what is this childish sulking? So ungrateful." "Mom," Svetlana said quietly, removing her earrings, "that really was wrong." "What was wrong?" the mother-in-law retorted, raising her eyebrows. "I gave what I thought was appropriate. I had promised you earrings for a long time, and to Ria, a practical item." "A used practical item," someone from the relatives clarified. Pavel Borisovich, Konstantin's father, who was usually quiet and uninvolved in family matters, suddenly stood up. "Antonina," he said sternly, "you've crossed a line. Ria spent so much time and effort to make us all happy, and you humiliated her." "I didn't humiliate anyone," Antonina Viktorovna protested. "We just have a special relationship with my daughter." "And what is your relationship with your daughter-in-law?" Pavel Borisovich inquired. "For 5 years, you've harassed her with your nitpicking, and today you decided to show everyone her place in the family. Let her cook in an old apron while your daughter shines in diamonds. Antonina Viktorovna flushed. "Don't you dare speak to me in that tone." "I will," her husband replied firmly, "because I'm sick and tired of your games. Ria," he turned to Margarita, "please don't clear anything away. I apologize on behalf of my wife." Margarita stopped, still holding a container of salad. She looked at her husband. "And what do you say, Kostya? Will you remain silent again?" All eyes turned to Konstantin. He slowly stood up, walked over to his mother, and said softly but firmly, "Mom, you must apologize to Ria. What you did is unforgivable." "I will not apologize," Antonina Viktorovna declared, tilting her chin up. "I did nothing wrong." "Then you should leave," Konstantin said, surprising everyone, including himself. "What?" The mother-in-law's eyes widened. "You're kicking your own mother out over some apron?" "Not over an apron," Konstantin shook his head. "But because you don't respect my wife and you don't respect me. I've tolerated this for too long." Antonina Viktorovna shot a furious glance around the room, grabbed her purse, and headed for the exit. At the door, she turned. "You'll regret this, Kostya." As the door closed behind her, silence descended upon the room. Then Svetlana approached Margarita and offered her the box of earrings. "Take them. They should have been yours." "No," Margarita shook her head. "I don't want these earrings. I want respect." "And you deserve it," Svetlana said, hugging her sister-in-law. "Forgive us all for letting Mom behave like this for so long." After the mother-in-law's departure, the atmosphere at the table gradually lightened. Pavel Borisovich proposed a toast to Margarita. Everyone drank to her culinary talents, and the celebration continued, but with a different quality, more sincere and warm. Without Antonina Viktorovna's oppressive presence, everyone seemed to breathe more freely. Later that evening, after the guests had left, Konstantin helped Margarita clear the table. "Forgive me," he said quietly, "for not standing up for you sooner." "Why are you so afraid of your mother?" Margarita asked. Konstantin sighed. "I'm not afraid. It's just that she's always been a dominant personality, controlling everything. Dad usually gave in, and I got used to it. But today, I realize that's not right." "And now?" "Now," Konstantin said firmly, "everything will be different. I won't let her treat you like that, us." And he kept his word. In the following months, relations with Antonina Viktorovna were strained. She tried to reassert her former influence but met with her son's firm stance. Konstantin insisted on respectful treatment for Margarita and was prepared to sever contact if this condition wasn't met. They unexpectedly received support from Pavel Borisovich, who, for the first time in many years of marriage, began to assert his viewpoint in arguments with his wife. This was a true shock to Antonina Viktorovna. "Don't you love me anymore?" she asked her husband, tears in her eyes. "I do," Pavel Borisovich replied. "That doesn't mean I have to agree with you all the time, especially when you're wrong." 6 months later, realizing her usual tactics were no longer effective, Antonina Viktorovna unexpectedly visited Margarita when Konstantin was not at home. "May I come in?" she asked, her tone uncharacteristically hesitant. Margarita opened the door wider in silence, allowing her mother-in-law to enter. Antonina Viktorovna began, visibly struggling to find the words. "I came to apologize. What I did on New Year's was cruel and unfair." Margarita looked at her with surprise. "Why did you do that?" she asked directly. "What did I do to you?" Antonina Viktorovna sank into an armchair, suddenly appearing like an ordinary, tired woman, rather than a formidable mother-in-law. "Nothing. You did nothing wrong. I was afraid of losing my son. I felt like you were taking him away from me, and I tried to assert my superiority. It was foolish and petty. I understand now," she admitted, her voice trailing off, "why you've decided to apologize now, because I realized I could genuinely lose not only my son but also my husband. And," she faltered again, "I've started seeing a therapist. It was Pavel's idea. Can you imagine?" Margarita couldn't help but smile, picturing her father-in-law, usually so quiet, suddenly taking a stand. "And what did the therapist tell you?" "A lot," Antonina Viktorovna sighed, "mostly about how we parents try to control our children even when they're grown, and how that's wrong." She paused and added, "I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately, but I would like to start anew if you agree." Margarita looked at her mother-in-law for a long moment, weighing her words. "All right," she said finally, "let's try, but with one condition. No more manipulation or humiliation. We all deserve respect. You and I." Antonina Viktorovna nodded. "I promise." This marked a turning point in their relationship. Of course, not everything changed overnight. There were setbacks and moments when old grievances resurfaced, but Antonina Viktorovna genuinely tried to change, and Margarita and Konstantin gave her that chance. 2 years later, for another New Year's, the entire family gathered again at Konstantin and Margarita's home. This time, they prepared the meal together. Antonina Viktorovna volunteered to help her daughter-in-law, and when it was time for gifts, the mother-in-law presented Margarita with a small box. Inside were elegant silver earrings with amethysts. "They're not as expensive as those diamond ones," Antonina Viktorovna said, "but I chose them with love, and I thought the amethyst would suit your eyes." Margarita hugged her mother-in-law, tears welling up in her eyes. "They're beautiful. Thank you." That evening, after the guests had departed, Konstantin embraced his wife and whispered, "You did the impossible. You tamed my mother." "Not me," Margarita shook her head. "We all did it together. And you know what I realized? Sometimes you just have to stop tolerating things and clearly set your boundaries, even if it's scary." "Did you throw away that apron?" Konstantin suddenly asked. Margarita laughed. "No, believe it or not, it's hanging in the pantry. I decided that someday I'll tell this story to our children, so they know that any situation can be changed if you find the courage and don't stay silent when you're being humiliated." They stood by the window, gazing at the festive city, contemplating how one unpleasant incident, a moment of courage, could alter an entire life, and how a true family isn't defined by the absence of conflict, but by the ability to overcome it while maintaining mutual respect. And the worn apron remained hanging in the pantry, a reminder of a past that they had all managed to move beyond together.